This is version 35 of the Brawl Stars competitive tier list. And this was made with the help of the best players in the world. Literally, like, almost all of these guys are going to the World Championship this year. So a massive thank you to them for sharing their input to make the best and most accurate tier list possible. As always, we're going to rank brawlers from worst to best. Kicking us off is Frank, staying in the F tier. Frank's got tons of counters in the game, and one of his biggest counters is Shelly. And Shelly's one of the strongest brawlers in the game, even though she got nerfed this last update. She did receive a hypercharge. We'll talk about her later on. The point is, Frank can't be used very well right now. And I don't care what you guys say, neither can Edgar. He's staying in the F tier. Edgar is okay if there are no brawlers on the other team that do not have a knockback or slow or any other ability to deal with like tanks or close range brawlers. But let's be honest, if you're playing competitively, that doesn't happen. Next, we got Doug moving from the D tier. He got some buffs and now he's moving down to the F tier. Doug just does not have any abilities to really help him get close to enemies. And even in competitive matches, if he does get a nice super off and like heals back, everybody knows where he's gonna respawn and he's just like a sitting duck. Oh, but Gale's moved from the C tier down into the F tier. Gale's usually useful when he's there to counter tanks. And in this meta, there are so many other better options than him. So he's pretty obsolete at the moment. Okay, we're done with the F tier, moving to the D tier. Starting off is Jackie, staying in the D tier. Jackie at least has a gadget that helps her get close to enemies, but she's still pretty easy to deal with. It's kind of surprising to me because I think that her hypercharge is like one of the best hypercharges that were released. And she's a lot better with her hypercharge, but you still have to charge her hypercharge in order to use it in the first place. And most of the time that just leaves Jackie too vulnerable. BB is staying in the D tier. She got a decent health buff, but it doesn't really seem to have affected her very much. Her gadget also received an indirect nerf because of the universal power increase, which who knows, maybe that'll get changed later on and she'll actually have a chance. Chester's moving from the C tier down to the D tier. Chester really is a jack of all trades and a king of none. And when you're playing competitive Brawl Stars, you want to play the kings, and there's plenty of kings to go around. Hank is moving from the F tier up into the T tier. Oh, congratulations, Hank. Now, Hank received a health buff and a buff to his main attack damage, but it was not enough to bring him very high. He's still not very good. Surprisingly, Janet's moving from the A tier down into the D tier. Janet was already hurting pretty bad from the nerfs that she got a couple updates ago, and because of how this meta has shifted, she is hardly being played at all right now. Next, we got the C tier brawlers, also not very competitive. Penny's moving from the B tier down to the C tier. Penny isn't quite a D tier brawler, but she also hasn't been used a lot since the last update. I do think that she can be used non-competitively, but in competitive matches, what this tier list is actually for, she seems to be struggling at the moment. Buzz is moving from the B tier down to the C tier. A lot of tanks are struggling with this meta because of all the tank counters, and Buzz is one of them. Meg's moving from the B tier down to the C tier. A lot of brawlers with pets are being used right now, and as soon as her mecha is destroyed, she really struggles against getting past even like the smallest pets because her attack damage with her regular projectile is just so weak. Surge is also moving from the B tier down to the C tier. And this is similar to Meg because he really struggles against a lot of those different spawns because each attack projectile can only hit one target at a time. Bull is moving from the F tier up into the C tier. He is one of the few brawlers with the new hypercharge ability, and while it didn't make him like completely busted or unfair, it has made him way better than he was before, especially when using his gadget gear to allow him to use 4 stomper gadgets instead of only 3 a match, which really makes Bull like really strong 4 times. Next, we have the B tier brawlers. These ones could be competitive either against certain brawlers on certain maps or on the right map or mode. And Mortis is moving from the F tier up into the B tier. The rework to Mortis's long dash has made a world of difference for him. He does still get countered pretty hard by certain brawlers, but he's a lot more usable than he has been in a very long time. Leon is staying in the B tier. He received an HP buff, but he also got an indirect nerf to his Invisi-Heal star power since 1000 health per second isn't as much as it used to be, so he's kind of staying put. Lou's also staying in the B tier. I don't know how many of the updates this is in a row, but Lou has not changed for a very long time, and nothing's changed from this update, so he's staying in the B tier. And so is Lola. Pretty much same thing for her as well. Max is also staying in the B tier. She's just as good as she has been since a couple of updates ago when she actually got some nerfs, and she really relies on her team right now, so if she has the right teammates, then she can be amazing, but otherwise, she's not like the go-to option like she was. Dynamike's moved from the A tier down to the B tier. Dynamike is back to being the least used competitive thrower. He's still not awful, partially due to the fact that he can use his gadget gear in order to increase his gadget uses every single match, but he's still moving down because there are better options. Bo is staying in the B tier. Not much has changed for Bo. He's still right around where he was last update. El Primo is staying in the B tier. And this is kind of surprising because El Primo is maintaining his place even though a lot of tanks are struggling in the meta. I guess as long as he's able to like always charge his super just by taking damage, he's probably not going to be totally useless in a match. Grom is staying in the B tier. He's just slightly better than he was before because some of his counters can't be played as much in this meta, but he's not moving very much. Daryl's moving from the C tier up into the B tier. He's another tank that is surprisingly better than he was before this update, even though he didn't get any balance changes. The shield from his super is just so strong that even some of his counters have a tough time defeating him when he's rolling straight to them. Griff is staying in the B tier. Nothing's really changed for Griff except that he can use a 4th piggy bank gadget with the new gear, which is actually really useful on certain maps, but there are a lot of maps where it's not that important because just 3 uses is plenty to open things up for him. Jessie is staying in the B tier. Jessie's still a pretty good option, the fact that her attacks can bounce off of multiple enemy pets, but aside from that, she's pretty average. Poco is staying in the B tier. Poco's gadget and both of his star powers received indirect nerfs from this update because of the universal power increase between power levels, so he's actually slightly worse than he was before. Amber is in the B tier. She's actually another good choice against brawlers with pets since her attacks just go right through them and it doesn't matter how many pet spawns there are or anything like that, but not much has actually changed for her since last update. 8-Bit's going from the C tier up into the B tier. 8-Bit actually plays pretty well against a lot of the top brawlers right now, and some of his best maps are in the current rotation, but he's not amazing at everything, so that's why he's only in the B tier. Pam is staying in the B tier. She wasn't really affected very much by any of the changes this update. She's still pretty much just a decent choice on most maps and modes. Ash is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Honestly, the Byron-Ash combo is sort of making a small comeback, but Ash by himself has kind of fallen off a little bit, so he's in the B tier. Next is Brock staying in the B tier. Brock isn't the best long-range brawler right now, but he isn't the worst either. His Rocket Laces gadget can also make him a pretty safe choice, so keep that in mind. B tier for now though. Otis is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Otis is a really great tank counter, and even though there are better tank counters right now, he still has enough damage and range to be a decent brawler against anyone, but there seem to be some better choices at the moment. Colette's moving from the A tier down to the B tier. And honestly, the same thing kind of goes with Colette as for Otis. Not the best tank counter, but still good against most brawlers. She seems to really thrive at least on Heist for now. Rico is staying in the B tier. He's only slightly worse than before just because both of his gadgets were nerfed from the universal power increase, but other than that, not much has really changed for Rico. Colt is moving from the D tier up into the B tier. He is the 3rd brawler this update who received a hypercharge that we've talked about so far in this tier list, and for the first time in a very long time, he's a little bit above average. Cordelius is moving from the S tier down into the B tier. Cordelius was so broken last update and he got nerfed really, really hard. Despite the nerfs though, he's still a really good counter to tanks and he can create some really unfair 2v2s depending on who his team is and who he's facing. Sprout is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. There are 3 thrower options that are typically a better choice than Sprout right now, so it's still a really good choice to go with Sprout if you need a thrower and those 3s are already picked or banned or something like that, but otherwise there are better options. Rosa is going from the C tier up into the B tier. It's been a little bit, but since Rosa received the trait that allows her to charge her super by taking damage, she is gradually getting a little bit better and is being picked a little bit more in the competitive meta, so B tier seems to make sense for her right now. Oh wow, Gus moving from the S tier all the way down into the B tier. Gus has started to really struggle against the brawlers with pets, and some of the other changes in this meta have hurt him even more, so he's really just not quite as good as he used to be, especially when you consider the fact that there are better healers, namely Byron, who we'll talk about later on. Ems is staying in the B tier. Ems only has the range to be good on certain maps, but her attack can pierce through targets, which is very good in this meta, at least for those specific maps. Eve is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. She's really good against brawlers that have trouble getting past her hatchlings, as well as maps that allow her to hover over water so that she has more movement points than most brawlers do. Other than that though, she's not great against the top brawlers at the moment. Maisie is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. She's another brawler that really struggles against those brawler pets that we're seeing a lot of, and since tanks aren't being used as much, this is also hurting her a bit. Tick is unfortunately staying in the B tier. I was hoping he'd be moving down a little bit, but Tick did receive a very slight buff to his reload speed, and even though he's still in the B tier, he's a little bit better than he was last update. Stu is moving from the A tier down to the very top of the B tier. This is due to the fact that Stu struggles against some of those pet brawlers, and the fact that the tanks that Stu is really good against aren't being played quite as much as they were before. And now we have the A tier brawlers. These are very competitive options. They're just not quite as good as the S tiers. Nita is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. She's actually a really good counter to tanks, and her bear makes her good against brawlers that can't attack through it, and there are lots of maps in the rotation right now which Nita is just really good on. She's one of the most versatile tank counters in the game at the moment. Barley's also moved from the B tier up into the A tier. Even though both of Barley's star powers got an indirect nerf from the universal power increase between power levels, he's still one of the best throwers for competitive play simply because of how much map control his super provides. Willow is moving moving from the B tier up into the A tier. This is entirely because of her Scorpion Willow skin. I'm completely joking, but we are seeing that skin everywhere now. She's kind of similar to Barley, but she received a health buff, making her a much safer choice than Barley because her super does well against close range brawlers. Carl is staying in the A tier. He's still one of the most versatile brawlers in the game because of his long range and his ability to assassinate brawlers with his gadget and his super. He actually benefits more from the gadget gear than most brawlers since he has one of the best gadgets in the game. B is staying in the A tier. Throwers are a little bit higher in the meta right now, and they're the best counters to B, but she's still a really safe choice for a lot of maps right now. Ruffs is staying in the A tier as well. No major changes happen to Ruffs, so he's a really good brawler as usual since he just buffs whoever the top brawlers are, so you really can't go wrong with him. Chuck is starting out in the A tier. This is very hypothetical because he has not been released at the time that I've recorded this, and the pro players have not had a chance to play it, at least not most of them. So really his placement comes down to my own personal opinion of playing him against bots, which is not really something you should be basing decisions off of. That being said, he does pretty good damage to up close, and his super can easily get him pretty much anywhere on the map. So practically, I don't think he's gonna be less than A tier. He might even be a little bit better. We'll have to see. Just keep this placement with a grain of salt, and make sure you tell anybody that this is my own personal opinion. It's the only opinion coming from me on this entire tier list. Sandy is moved from the B tier up into the A tier. Sandy received a buff to his supercharge, so he's able to charge his super a lot more often throughout a match, so he's being used way more now than he was before. Mr. P is staying in the A tier. Mr. P's porters are actually really good against most of the top brawlers right now, so he's actually being used a lot, and that's partially due to the fact that he has the pet gear, which actually increases his porter's damage. RT is staying in the A tier. RT's got really great range, and he's really hard to assassinate because of his super. He can just like slam down so much damage if anybody jumps on him. Gray is staying in the A tier. Gray's fake injury star power isn't as good since it paired so well with his shield gear, but his super himself still makes him a very good brawler. Plus, the gadget gear can be pretty useful with his gadgets. Bonnie is staying in the A tier. Now, Bonnie did receive a very small nerf to her projectile speed, but her attack is honestly still pretty easy to land, even with auto aim, so she's still really good. Tara is staying in the A tier. Tara actually received a nerf to her total health, but the new gadget gear definitely makes up for that. The fact that she can spawn an additional set of her 3 clones with her gadget is actually really broken. Belle is staying in the A tier. She's actually pretty close to the same place in this last update. Nothing's really changed for her. Jean is staying in the A tier. Jean might have been an S tier brawler if he didn't get countered so hard by brawler pets, but his super is still good enough to keep him in the A tier. Sam's also staying in the A tier. Now, there are a few really good counters to Sam, but if none of them are on the enemy team, Sam's star power makes him like unstoppable, really. Mandy is moving from the C tier all the way up into the A tier. She received a buff to her main attack damage, and it made her way better. There are several brawlers that she can now two-shot even if they have the shield gear on, which is just crazy. Spike has moved from the B tier up to almost the top of the A tier. Spike got his hypercharge, which easily bumped him up a tier. He's probably even S tier if he wasn't just so fragile. So there's a little bit of a risk between playing his shield gear or his new gadget gear, which can be really good. Buster is moving from the D tier all the way up into the A tier. Now, Buster received buffs to his health and his main attack damage, so now he is good. He's way harder to kill now, and he's consistently 3-shotting most brawlers in the game without even having to be right next to them for his max damage. If you've been sitting on Buster, now is the time to pull him back out again. Byron's also moved from the D tier all the way up into the A tier, and honestly, could have been S tier. He received a huge buff to his supercharge rate, which is just massive. I actually looked it up, and besides his reload speed being a little bit slower, Byron now has the same stats as he did way back about a year and a half ago when he was one of, if not the best brawler in the game. So it only makes sense that he's one of the top tier brawlers, and like I said, he really could be S tier. But now it's time for the actual S tier brawlers, which the pros pretty much unanimously agree are the best in the game right now. And starting us off, we have Squeak staying in the S tier. Squeak received nerfs to his star power and his gadget, and he still managed to stay in the S tier. Even though he's not dealing as much damage, Squeak probably uses his new gadget gear better than any brawler in the game with his residue gadget. It's just so insane. Honestly, he's become one of my favorite brawlers to play, even though I hated playing Squeak for some reason when he was first released. Crow is also staying in the S tier. Crow's star power got nerfed again, and it still seems to be the better star power to use. Additionally, similar to Squeak, Crow's slowing toxin gadget uses the new gadget gear very well, and he still deserves that S tier placement. Piper is moving from the B tier up into the S tier. Piper actually received a very slight nerf to her homemade recipe gadget, but it's still a great gadget, so she's actually benefiting very much from the new gadget gear. More importantly, she received a damage buff, so she is now two-shotting tons of brawlers right now. And yes, it is enough to bump her up from the B tier all the way up to the S tier. Nani is actually moved from the C tier all the way up into the S tier. Her gadget actually got nerfed, but she got a buff to her attack damage, which way made up for the nerf. Her attack is so strong that she can actually one-shot multiple brawlers in the game if she can land all 3 projectiles on them, which is insane. Pearl is starting out in the S tier. Now, at the time that I asked the pros, there weren't too many pros that had actually unlocked Pearl, so she hasn't been used competitively, at least not very much, because she also has been banned from a lot of competitive tournaments and stuff like that. That being said, the great players that I have talked to that have used her a lot have pretty much all said the same thing, and that is that she's really strong and should probably get nerfed. So use her before she gets nerfed. Fang is also moved from the B tier all the way up into the S tier. Fang received a buff to his super damage, which was also an indirect buff to his fresh kick star power. More importantly, his super charge rate was buffed to 1 less hit needed to charge his super. So honestly, he's pretty broken right now. He is another brawler that if you were sleeping on Fang, it's time to take him off the shelf and start playing him because he's good. But Shelly, staying in the S tier, is the very top of the tier list. And even though she did receive a nerf to her movement speed, she is one of the few brawlers that received a hypercharge, and she is really good with it. Not only is she using her hypercharge better than the rest of the brawlers, but even the new gadget gear giving her more clay pigeons is just ridiculous, because if she supers somebody, they are slowed, and then you activate that gadget and it's an auto aim to be able to hit people from a long distance away and deal tons of damage. She alone is pretty much making close range brawlers unplayable. And that is every brawler in the game ranked worst from best. If you're gonna grab a screenshot, make sure you include my face in there, and don't you dare crop it if you're going to share it with anybody. Once again, I want to give a huge shout out to all of the pros who gave their feedback and helped create this tier list. This is not my tier list. I did not make this. They did it. I had an entirely offhand experience with the exception of Chuck. So let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section below. As always, make sure you guys subscribe for future tier lists and check out these other awesome videos right here. For now, this is KairosTime ticking by. We will see you in Brawl Stars.